Welcome to WordPress Portsmouth Meetup for the 19th of October 2022. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can use the ID of wp-pompey, and you can use a hashtag of wp-pompey and also online WP Meetup, which other online meetups use around the world. If you want to contact us using Slack, and the UK Slack channel is called Meetup Portsmouth, and you can find out about that Slack channel by visiting our website wp-pompey.org.uk. And also you can visit about WordPress Meetup's Code of Conduct, and you can find out about our Code of Conduct, which basically says when you're on these meetups, you've got to be nice to everybody, don't do anything which people wouldn't like, and if you do something like that, then somebody might come down on a ton of bricks. And that's probably not the best terms for it, but there you go. Tonight we have connected to Zoom, and I have started the organizer introduction, and I haven't said who I am. I'm Herb Miller. I'm a co-organizer of WordPress Portsmouth Meetup. The other co-organizers of this meetup, one of them is here today, and that's Abba. And she's
Hello, everybody.
And she has got sound working.
I've got sound now. I haven't got video yet, but I'm working.
And when are you going to be busy in a WordPress core meeting?
At 9, I'll leave the
9 o'clock. So we should finish before that starts, yeah. 7:30.
Thank you.
So we're getting close to the bit where I tell you that I'm going to start talking about local development environments. And I've put lightning talks in there because hopefully some people are going to be able to tell things about certain local development environments, their own, and also some of the tools they might use that I may or may not have mentioned before we get to that point. And if we haven't already had questions and answers, but by 8 o'clock we'll have some questions and answers, and I probably didn't mean to have that in there. And then round about 8:15 we'll wrap up, and I'll go through some of the other things I like to cover at the end of each particular meetup. And then at 8:30 we can say thank you very much for coming, and come again, see you again in November and December, and that'll be another 12 months of WordPress Portsmouth meetups. So can I go forward? Since 2018, when the WordPress Portsmouth meetup restarted, we've had some sponsors, and they are redIT, who are a hosting company based in Gosport, and Scott's not here at the moment, but he might be. And he offers you a 25% discount. All you have to do is type WordUp at your checkout, and you can get 25% discount on your hosting forever. 34SP, a company based in Manchester who do website hosting, have also been sponsors for us. When we physically met, they would provide the pizzas and other different food things. If you go to their website and you buy some hosting from them, you can have a 3-month trial for free using the code wp-pompey. Right, you know it's being recorded and you can see me there. So here we go. We're going to talk about WordPress local development environments. Now this is a photograph that Scott, I was just letting some people into the room, hold on.
I can do those for you if you want.
Right, 17 now, that's not bad, is it? This is a photograph that Scott took after we had the meetup in August as he went home. And he took a couple of photographs, and at least 2 of them are now available on the WordPress.org photos directory. Abba's got a couple in there, and so have I. And you can all have fun adding those things on there, as long as you're prepared to share your photographs with CC0. What's that, Abba?
Creative Commons 0.
That's it. Well, thank you, Steve. So there you go. I've used a different photograph somewhere else where I've written about it, which is a picture of a flower in a rock. Right, local development environments, what are they? Well, I asked some questions in the WordPress Pompey and the Meetup thing, which are: do you run local and or staging copies of your live sites? Do you back up your live sites and restore them to other environments? Do you develop environment enhancements? to your sites in these other environments, and do you maintain the production and development environments and keep the content reconciled? And I said, if your answers are yes, then you can come along and talk to us about it and tell us how you do it. And it'd be nice to hear, what's your setup? What do you use your environment for? What tools do you use? How do you do these tasks? For example, backup or export, restore, import, reconcile, develop, test, debug, release. You might not know what they are. And why would you recommend your solution to other people? And what are the pros and cons of it? And is there anything else that I haven't thought about? So if you go and click on the link to wp-pompey website, you can see those questions there. So what is a development environment? Well, stolen from Elementor's blog post on the subject, they say a WordPress development environment is where you work on new websites and you play around, whatever that means, with plugins and themes and test changes and updates and to your existing websites before they go live. That's basically what I use my local development environments for. Playing around means developing plugins and themes, and testing changes and updates means possibly testing bugs as well. Now there's different forms of local development environments. Some people think that local means actually on your own PC, which is how I do it. So it runs on your computer. And the other one is a remote or hosted one where it's not the live site, but it's what might be called a staging site. So the difference between the local and remote or hosted is runs on your computer locally, runs on hosting otherwise. No one can access it really from the internet when it's on your local machine. All the files you're working with are local and you're using your own preferred tools, whatever they may be. Whereas in hosting, it runs on their system. Things are accessible from the internet, so people can probably see what you're doing. The files are remote, which makes it difficult for you to, may make it difficult for you to edit them and change them and control them. And you're restricted perhaps to using the tools that are available on the hosting. Everyone agree with that? Anyone agree with that?
Yeah.
Steve does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's good.
partially.
Right. So actually in the WordPress meetup, I said, they asked this question: do you have a local development environment for your WordPress sites? If so, would you like to tell us about it? What's it for? Does it help you anywhere? And why would you recommend it to others? And I've had quite a few answers, which are, yes, I do. It's on my desktop and I'm happy to talk about it in the meeting. I have my development environment for WordPress. This helps me in deployment. Yes, testing. Local by Flywheel, and that's from somebody who's not here today. Yeah, I can't remember who that's from. Local in terms of not being internet accessible. Now, is that from Kelvin? No, maybe not. A very basic local site. Two people said no, and I don't think they are either. And somebody who said, I can't see what it says because it's hidden by my UI screen sharing thing. Do that. Sorry. I can give a 3-minute talk, cybersecurity consultant. Who's that? Mike, which was your answer? Mike, which?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I was the first one. I said, yes, I do. It's on my desktop, blah, blah, blah.
Okay, good. And where are you based?
I'm in British Columbia.
Okay.
Our business is in the US and all our hosting is in the US, but
Right. Now, Neil, you said you could talk about something, did you?
Yeah, I was just saying local by Flywheel is the one that I use. So
Lovely.
I'm happy to talk about that. If you
That's what Simon Bragg wants to hear about. Anyway,
Okay.
so some people don't know what all these different environments are. So I'm going to move on and see if I can get to them. So local installations I have a variety of different names depending on whatever you're using. So there's things called WAMP, LAMP, MAMP and XAMPP. And you might think that the W stands for Windows and the L stands for Linux and the M stands for Mac. And you might think that the A stands for Apache, which is what I do. There's also a thing called Nginx, which actually becomes an E, so it's become a WAMP LAMP MAMP or XAMPP. And then M stands for MySQL or MariaDB. And finally, P stands for PHP. And in the XAMPP solution, it also includes Perl, which is what a lot of people used before PHP was around. But if you're a WordPress person, you probably don't go anywhere near Perl. Right, so on the PowerPoint or PDF on the website, each of these different things, the tools I will talk about will have links from them, so that if you don't have them and you want to get them individually, then you can download those things by following the links. So those are the different stacks that you could possibly have. So WAMP is Windows, Apache, MySQL and PHP, and LAMP is Linux, Apache, MySQL and PHP. Some of the different tools that the Elementor blog post I read talked about were local, which is local by Flywheel, which is Neil uses that, and someone else wants to. DevKinsta, which is another one, but it uses Nginx as opposed to Apache. XAMPP, MAMP, WampServer, which is used by Andrew Leonard, but he's not here this evening, but I've got some stuff from him. And also there's this thing called Docker, which is basically for advanced users. That requires a command line, but it's something that's used by a functionality that WordPress uses called wp-pompey. So local, the local WordPress development tool can be downloaded from localwp.com, and it's supposed to enable you to have multiple environments which you can develop your sites in, and you can upload and download them from your hosting company if you happen to be using Flywheel or WPEngine. I don't use either of those, and when eventually we get round to asking Neil what he uses, he might tell us. I had a go at installing it, and the first thing it said on my Windows machine was, oh, I couldn't update the host file. But eventually I did manage to get it working, having turned off my Kaspersky and also turning off my current installation. So it was a bit of a battle, but I got somewhere with it. Another one is called DevKinsta, which you can download from kinsta.com. Another free local WordPress development site, and I've not played with that. Anyone here played with DevKinsta at all?
I've used it quite a bit.
Oh, there you go. Do you want to talk about it, Abba?
Only that I find it quite straightforward. And
All
I've
right,
used it for testing releases and things as well. So found that quite, and it's worth reading their help if you get stuck. I've used local as well. I think that's quite useful too. And Flywheel and Apache, and Docker I've used for certain things, but find it hard going. But I think that's largely because it just needs a really good help guide, and I think it will be probably much more powerful than I currently find it.
Right, fair enough. Right, XAMPP, which is the one which provides the Perl as well as another environment available that you can download from apachefriends.org. I've not used it at all. MAMP, your local web server. Now I thought that M stood for Mac. It turns out you can actually run this thing on Windows as well. And there's a free version, which you can download from MAMP info in Windows, and a pro version, which you have to spend 89 quid for. Now the free version actually only supports one installation, which isn't much crop if you need to have multiple ones. But if you go and look at that comparison matrix, then you can find out what you can get for 89 quid. But I think at the moment, having installed it and played with it briefly, I'm still quite happy with my own homegrown installation. There's a thing called WampServer, which Andrew Leonard uses, and you can download that. It's written by someone in French, but you can find the English translation of it from here. And he told me briefly that there are a number of different videos that we've got here, which you can watch how to install WampServer, how to install WordPress using WampServer, and then how to transfer a live site to WordPress. Sorry about the lowercase p there. From WordPress to your local host without using plugins. And I watched that one. It was written about 7 years, or the video recorded about 7 years ago. It's a bit old, and the hosting he used was SiteGround. It no longer uses cPanel, so it might be almost irrelevant. I tried installing it on my local machine because Andrew suggested I might, and I failed at the first hurdle, as I had done with the other ones, local and MAMP, simply because I already had an installed version of something that worked, and they were both trying to use something that was already there but failing. So that's not a bad thing about it. If you haven't already got something installed, then it might work fine. But if you've already got something, you're worried it might break your system, which is what it actually did for a while. And then there's this thing called Docker, which you can download from docker.com. And the reason you have this one is if you want to use this environment called wp-env.
Did someone say they managed to get a Docker container running on DigitalOcean?
I've done it. I didn't say it, but I have done it in the past.
Okay. Oh, was you going to talk about it?
No, but I mean, I have done it. I mean, I've done a lot with Docker in the past, not recently, but it wasn't me who said it. But I can help if you need help.
Oh yeah, I'm just interested in how does that run?
Well, Docker's basic, just in very simple terms, it's kind of, you can run an entire system as long as it uses the same, as long as it's Windows or Linux, depending on which one you're on. It can run an entire system in one image, basically. So it's a bit like a virtual machine, but it's different to that. So you don't need as many resources on your local machine if you're using Docker as you would do with a virtual machine.
But so when you put it on the DigitalOcean droplet, did you have to do a lot of like port mapping, or was it?
When you say port mapping, you mean port forwarding to get your
port forwarding. So
8-point port. Yeah. You would still have to do that. You would still have to do that. Yeah, but you would map a special port for the Docker container if you had one, because obviously you come in on a machine, don't you, which has got its own port mapping, and then you somehow have to forward that to the Docker container, which is like another machine, effectively. So yeah, but all that can be done. Yeah.
So would that enable you, for example, you could run probably like 4 sites on the same droplet?
Yeah, you could do. Yeah, I don't know how. I've never tried it with WordPress. I'm new to WordPress, but I don't see why you can't. You know, it's just web, isn't it? It's just a web application, really. So there's no reason you can't do it. Yeah, but what Docker does, it does separate out all of the. So if you had one WordPress environment running in one container, you could have another one. If you just wanted to separate them for security reasons, you could do that, you know. Yeah. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but I mean, there's probably a good reason. But I'm not a WordPress man, you see. I'm more a systems man, Linux man. Yeah.
Oh.
I've only just started using WordPress for my own sites. But I did work at Akamai. Sorry, I'm probably banging on too much. Tell me if I'm saying too much. But I did work at Akamai, the CDN, you know, the web performance company, and they use a staging environment as well for their when they're hosting people's websites. They use a staging environment when they change everything too. So I understand what you're saying. It's a very good idea. Obviously, it's a good thing to do, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. No, it has a lot of advantages.
Yeah, well, it's safe, isn't it, to start with? If you break something, you break it in your own home, don't you, before giving it out to the customer. Yeah, rather than just soak testing it on the customer's network, you know.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Right, I'm back now. I'm looking at the chat, and I'll reply to those comments and so on in a minute. So so if you are going to be doing some local development, you probably need to be able to edit the stuff you're developing. Now, there's a number of different options you can use. I use JetBrains PHP Storm because I used to go to PHP Portsmouth PHP Hands Meetup, and I won it once upon a time. And once you've used it for a year, you think, well, I'll carry on using it. So you have to pay a few quid to continue to have a license, but that's what I've been using. But I've also heard that there's a lovely tool called VS Code, which is downloadable from code.visualstudio.com, which is a slightly smaller IDE, but it has enough different tools that you can install so that you can do the same sort of things I was doing PHP Storm, which means it understands WordPress and it understands PHP and it understands things you might need to develop like JavaScript and so on, and you can do lots and lots of debugging, and it's marvelous. And that one's for free, so maybe one day I'll switch to that. Some people use just editors, and there's one called Context Editor, which is free, and there's another one called Sublime Text. Now, Arnold says he likes Atom and Bracket from Adobe. Now, I read that Atom is going out of support in December this year. Did you know that? I would have listed it in here if it wasn't for that fact. So you've got your local development environment and you've got your IDE, but what is it you're actually trying to achieve to create a local version of your site? Maybe we haven't come to that yet. So I'm going to share what my local development environment is. And mine is Windows, Apache, MySQL, and PHP, and it's a slightly custom installation. I installed each one of those things separately, apart from the fact Windows was there already. And I use it to develop my WordPress plugins and themes. And I build and or maintain sites for my customers and family members and my own websites. And I've got quite a few of those. Sometimes I actually debug problems with WordPress core and often plugins and maybe themes. And having debugged them, I might actually raise issues against WordPress core or Gutenberg, whatever it is, if I think it's worthwhile, if it's worth my effort. More often than not, I suppose it's my own problem or a problem that I don't think other people will get. But I don't often raise PRs, which stands for pull requests, to fix the problems simply because I haven't got an environment which is good enough to enable me to create the sort of code that people want. That's an admission of my failings. So what tools do I use? How do I do these tasks? Why would you recommend your solution to others? What are the pros and cons there? I'll come on to those in a couple of slides, but if you were to go to visit that link there on my website, herbmiller.me, then I have written far more detail about what I'm about to tell you in some respects, but less in others. So the tools I use in my PC are things that you might use because you happen to have a live site and you don't actually have a local development environment, but you still need to get something to it. So I use FileZilla for my FTP file transfer protocol. I use 7-zip as a different way of zipping up and unzipping plugins, themes, and so on. And I also use wp-CLI, which is the command line interface to WordPress. So if you happen to have a WordPress local install, then you probably benefit from also having wp-CLI, so you can do things to your WordPress install without actually having to go to visit the front end. Because I'm a developer, I use Git as my primary version control system. But because I happen to be a developer of WordPress plugins, I also need to use Subversion in order to manage the version of the plugin on WordPress.org. And because I use Subversion, I don't want to do the command line stuff, I actually use Tortoise SVN, which is the client version of it that runs on my Windows Explorer. It makes it very easy for me to do 4 or 5 standard commands to release the latest version of a plugin to WordPress.org. When I'm working with my databases, which are MySQL databases, then I use wp-pompey, which is a PHP client interface, browser interface to the databases. And when I'm developing my code and I want to test it, I use PHP unit. So, as a task, if you want to export or import or reconcile your website from hosted, which we see on the right, to your local, which we see on the left, the question is, what's the easiest method you've got for transferring the website between the locations? And are those tools external to your website or are they internal to your website? So I haven't actually shown the details of all the different things, but we can see here that my database, I do transfer it from my hosted to my local site and then back again. And I do the same for plugins and themes and uploads and WordPress core itself. But the things I don't transfer backwards and forwards are things which have to be different between them. So that's your wp-config.php file and your .htaccess file. Now, I've written about those in my website, miller.me, what the differences are. So in order to transfer my database, I basically use php-myadmin to export the SQL to a file. I then download that file to my PC, and I then use MySQL to import the database, or I use php-myadmin to import the database into my local machine. I then go about fiddling about with it in order to make it the local version. One way of doing that is to use a plugin called Better Search Replace, which will enable you to change things, URLs. But there's other things you might need to do in your local installation, which is you might need to turn off some plugins which you're using in a hosting environment, live environment, which you don't actually want to run in your local environment. If you were to submit a contact form in your local environment, you wouldn't necessarily want to have that contact form submitted to the people who are running the live site. And if you added a user or deleted a user, all sorts of different things you might do. You want to disable your database from doing in your local what the live site does. Other ways of updating your database is to use a plugin such as Updraft Plus, which Steve Wood has talked about before. How many years ago was that? 2 years ago?
Yeah, it must be at least that.
Yeah.
I think.
You can find that his presentation on the wp-pompey website. And it's a very good solution. Another tool you use, I believe, is Duplicator.
Yes, that's true. It's great tool.
I've never used Duplicator. Does it do things like localizing your local install?
If you go for Duplicator Pro, which you've got to obviously pay for, it does a few more bits. One thing it does do when you migrate a site is to update all the URLs.
Oh, good, right. So that's how you can get your database across. Updraft Plus will also do things like your plugins and themes and uploads, correct? Does Updraft Plus do your version of WordPress as well?
No,
No, I
doesn't
don't
do
think.
core file.
Yeah. So you have to find another way of getting your WordPress installed. Well, the easiest way of doing that, of course, is just to go and follow the 5-minute WordPress install, because if you've got WordPress 6.0.3 running in your local machine and WordPress 6.0.3 running in your production machine, you've got the same version of the system, and that's basically what you want. You may decide you want to go to a newer version of WordPress on your local machine. So when 6.1 is available, you can install that one first. And you can just do that by using the standard install tools. But if you don't do that, then of course you can, and the standard install tool could be by using your WP CLI. But if there's uploads files which you need to get from your live site, then you might decide to zip them up on the live system, download one zip file and unpack it, or you might just go and use FTP and say, I'll take the whole lot one by one and wait for a while for it to happen.
Duplicator actually does include all the core files as well.
All right, good.
So that's quite clean way of doing it. You basically create the archive and then transfer 2 files, run the install script, and it unpacks everything as it was on the other server.
Does that include your local machine?
I've never tried it to a local environment.
Sorry?
I've never tried it to a local environment.
Nor have I. Anyone else had to go duplicator to a local environment? Nope. Right. If you happen to use version control plugins, themes, and so on under Git, it's also possible just to use your version control system to push and or pull latest versions of the plugins and or themes to and from your local and hosted environments. And that's what I do on some of my sites. And I use a thing called PuTTY in order to SSH into my Linux box, where I then write commands to say, please pull me the latest version of my Git repository for this plugin and or theme to my environment, and then I can upload it, and vice versa. I'll do the same thing on my local system, get the latest version directly from the Git repository. And another thing I have down here is a file compare system, and I use a tool called Beyond Compare, which is my preferred way of finding the differences between directories and files, seeing what's changed and potentially taking in the differences. When you happen to be working with 2 different versions of wp-config.php, one is the production site, one is your local site, there will be some differences. So you don't want to just copy the file across, but you might want to have a look at some of the different settings that are in there. And the same is true of your htaccess file. Now, I haven't covered reconcile, and I'm not going to, but that is how I go about doing it, because I have a custom thing. I don't use Updraft Plus and Duplicator. I just use the tools that I've got, phpMyAdmin and file transfers. The tools are also provided by SiteGround. Now, when it comes to developing and testing stuff, and I mostly develop plugins, I have these plugins installed in my WordPress local environment and in my WordPress environment, my primary one, and within the WP content plugins thing, there would be my plugin called plugin name. And because I'm going to have a version control version of it, there's a folder called .git, which contains all the different versions I've ever done of this particular plugin, and Git is used to manage basically all your files, and all the stuff that Git does is stored in here. There will be other different directories in a plugin, and some of these are used, say, for example, if you happen to be building a Gutenberg block, you might have some JavaScript written in this source, and you'll be using a tool called npm with Node.js to convert your JavaScript source into the build components. And this will actually use a thing called Webpack to do that conversion. So you end up installing all these different tools in order to do particular things you want to do. If you happen to be a keen PHP developer and you like to use libraries from other people, then you might be using Composer to bring in the PHP libraries in the vendor subdirectory. So I develop my code by using PHP Storm, and when I need to, I build my blocks using npm and node and using Webpack underneath, which is all controlled by a file called package.json. And if I've developed something which I think is actually needs to be tested, then I will write some test code, which I put into the tests folder, and run that through PHP unit in order to say that this code works. More often than not, I use my own plugin to debug stuff, but if you happen to be a PHP developer who likes to debug stuff inside your IDE, then there's a tool called xdebug that does the job perfectly. Other different tools you might use just to go and do things to get content, so on and so forth. Specifically for releasing stuff. So I use 7-zip to create the zip file of my plugin, which I then upload to my website my website. If I'm going to release a plugin to WordPress.org, then of course I have to use SVN, which I haven't listed here. So,
Hi,
hello.
it's me, Arnold. I have a question.
Yes.
It's about for the development when you want to create an update on the software of WordPress. If I'm not I don't like PHP and I want to use something else of PHP on WordPress, I can make some upgrade on the software and work with other language of programmation and use Node.js by example, because I think Node.js is a feature of the web. So PHP is too old, and we see many bugs with this program of programmation, of this language of programmation. So when I see many developers we work with PHP, I see many bugs with this language of programmation, and Node.js is better stable, I think, and I believe. So do you think it's possible? I think it's possible to work with Node.js and not with PHP. Do you think it's possible? Or do you believe it's possible?
Anyone else want to have a go at answering that question?
Well, yeah, but like the Gutenberg blocks, they're done in a lot of React type kind of scripts. So there's quite a lot of I think there's quite a lot of JS integration with WordPress now, especially with the Guten. If you're doing the new style Guten blocks and you want to develop like block patterns and things like that.
Yes, if you're developing Gutenberg blocks, then there might be some which are developed just in JavaScript, but there is pretty much good chance that even a dynamic block will be running on the server with PHP code as well. So at the moment with WordPress, you can't get totally away from PHP, but you can write a lot more in JavaScript if you want.
So okay, so it's possible to do that. Generally, it's possible.
Yeah, but
Okay.
at the moment with WordPress, a plugin has to be written. The base plugin has to be written in PHP. If it happens to be mostly delivered in JavaScript, then the PHP ensures that the JavaScript is what's served up to the browser, and it does whatever it does.
I have a question about that. When we're talking about Node.js, aren't we talking about running JavaScript on the back end, not in the browser?
Yes. The question is?
Okay, so we're talking, I'm just not quite clear what we're talking about. So we're
All
talking
right.
about
So
having the PHP spawn some JavaScript running on the back end as opposed to the browser. Is that what we're saying?
So in development, if I was to write a block, which I would put into the source folder, then that would be written in a version of JavaScript like ES6 or something, and I would need to use Node.js in order to transform that to the version which is used in the browser.
But a block is ultimately going to run in the browser, right?
Yeah, so it is used in the browser, but the code that you write for the block isn't accessible by the browser directly because it's written in a version of JavaScript with React, which is not something the browser can handle. So it needs to be compiled, or whatever the word is for it, built.
Yes.
So the same. So you may write some CSS as Sass, and that needs to be converted into the straight CSS, which is used in the browser. The same is true with developing a block. You run a tool to convert it from your source code to the executable code.
But that executable code is running in the browser.
The executable code is then shipped to the browser and run in the browser, yes. And
so we're not really running JavaScript on the back end.
Well, you're running a complete build environment inside.
Well, yeah, okay.
Yeah. But and a runtime of your production site, no, you're not running any JavaScript in the back end. You're just
all right. That was my curiosity.
Yeah, we have Node.js server. With a Node.js server, you can run in the backend, and you can write in backend some JavaScript code and compile your code. So
yes,
I think it's an upgrade.
You can, but WordPress doesn't do it that way.
Yeah. Great.
Right.
It's smart.
So would I recommend my environment? Well, I would recommend using a local development environment to anyone who has bespoke code they need to manage, or for people who have complex content updates, or to people whose business depends on their website operating correctly, such as an e-commerce site with WooCommerce or an event site, because you don't want to go and destroy your production site. People who just happen to have blogs, it might not matter if you've broken something for half a day. But I wouldn't suggest copying my own environment because it was built over a number of years, and I have found some limitation with it. And I think that some of the more modern tools like Local or MAMP might be better if you happen to be a new starter who wanted to start developing have your own local environment. So I've listed a couple of pros and cons there, but I'm not going to talk about them. You can read them, and we're going to move on to somebody else. Who wants to talk about who wants to talk about their environment? Mike or Neil?
I'll go ahead if you want. Should I try to share my screen, or should
right, so I'll stop sharing and I'll let you share your screen.
Okay, let's see if I can now. Let me find what I want to share. If this gets too awkward, I'll. Okay, so first question, do you run local or station copy? So I said local, but actually it's a little more complicated than that. I have, I create test sites on my system, on my desktop, and then we do have one test site, on Lightsail. Let me see if I can figure out how to share this.
MNT Lightsail test site.
Oh, okay, so you're seeing it, but I've got a bunch of Zoom stuff, and let me see if I can move this around. Sorry about this. Okay, so I found lights. Okay, so for sites that you want to be really live and interacting with the rest of the world, I've had good success with Lightsail just because, once you have an AWS account, you can create and destroy sites at Lightsail. They only charge you for sites while they're running. So if I want to make 3 or 4 sites and try something and then shut them down, it only costs a few dollars. So we have a couple of sites. One of them is kind of a hobby site, which we don't want to mess up, but it's no big deal if it is. But we have another site that is a commercial site where most of our income is generated, so we can't afford to take chances with that one. So before I do anything, I test it on my desktop, and then I test it on our light sale site. So, okay. So I haven't, with regard to backing up and restoring things, I haven't had much success with those plugins like Updraft, and I've tried a couple of others. At the end of the day, I've come to the conclusion that I'm just better off backing up and restoring the database with MySQL commands, similar to what Herb said, and just basically copying the whole directory tree when I back up. So I have a combination of shell scripts and some Python code that just backs up all our sites every night, just brings down, just does a secure shell copy and just copies the whole directory structure down to my local machine. And if I want to put it somewhere else, I just basically copy the whole directory structure to that place. And then, of course, as you mentioned, Herb, the wp-config and HTTP access files have to be different between those sites. So, that's been my strategy. Let me see if I can see. Are you seeing a thing that says backup files?
Yes.
Okay. So after day in the middle of the night, have some scripts that copy all our sites down, and then I just have some code that just basically plots out the size of them, because actually, as you can see here, let me find one. Oh, here we go. Occasionally I get a surprise. Are you seeing that where Friday is this long thing sticking out here?
Yeah, we can see that.
Yeah, yep. Turns out I gave one of the plugin support people an account on the test site. I thought they were just going to look at it. But, then in the morning I saw this, and that was kind of a red flag that was handy, because I went in and it turned out they had installed Updraft and backed up the site and then restored it, and actually broken the connection between MemberPress and Stripe, if anybody knows what that is. But just being this was handy just to see, gives me an idea that something went wrong. The backup sizes, and of course sometimes the backups fail, and then you'll get a really small size. And then also, I do also daily back up my HTTP logs to my local machine. Neither SiteGround, where we host our commercial site, nor Lightsail, they save those for a little while, but not very long. So I also back up those to my local machine daily, so that I can, if I need to go back in the logs and look at HTTP accesses. So that's just kind of a, custom tool that I use. So I guess I regularly keep backups of my live sites, and I do restore them. So I keep backups, and then I'll restore a backup to a local, kind of a clone of my site on my local machine, so I can test plugins and test little code tweaks that I'm going to do before I think about doing them on a real site. And then I will also restore those to our test site at Lightsail. So on my local sites, there's stuff, as Herb mentioned, that you can't test. And in particular, our sites are based on the core of our sites is MemberPress, BuddyPress, and BBPress. I don't know if people are familiar with those plugins or not. But, you know, BuddyPress and BBPress provide people's profile pages and provide forums that the users can use. And MemberPress is what allows us to take people's credit cards and charge them to be members of the site. And that communicates with a credit card processor called Stripe. And so none of that stuff can be tested on my desktop. On the light sale test site, Stripe has a test mode, so I can connect MemberPress to Stripe in test mode on the light sale site and do a certain, actually quite a bit of testing there. So when a new version of MemberPress comes out, I always test that to make sure something isn't broken. If that communication between MemberPress and Stripe broke on our live site, it would be basically a disaster. That would be difficult to recover from. So do you develop enhancements? So yes, I develop enhancements on first on my desktop. So if I'm doing some custom PHP code or JavaScript, I'll do it first on my desktop, test it on one of the clone sites, then I'll load it up to this light sale test site. So that's working, you know, that's live and accessible over the network. And test it in both those places before you know, before loading the code up to our real site. I'm not really sophisticated enough to use any of those code development things. So I just edit the code in an editor and test it out on one of my sites. I'd probably be better if I had some more sophistication there. Okay, do you maintain production environment, development environment, and keep the content reconciled? No, I don't know any way to do that. What I do is when I go to do something, I clone our real site, load it down to my desktop, and then set up a running clone on my desktop, and I try things. Big plugins and stuff like that. But then once I'm happy, I know what I'm doing. I go back to the real site and do those same things there. I do not try to push the development site back up to the real site. I have thought about doing that, and I can't imagine any way I can get it to work if for no other reason that on the clone, on the development site, MemberPress and Stripe are going to get out of sync. And that alone is going to preclude pushing that site back up to the real site. Am I making any sense here?
Yes, that's true for sites with WooCommerce as well. For example, you can, if you download a copy of a live site and then try to put it back again, you might have lost all the orders that have been made the next day. Yeah, and not only that, but at least with MemberPress, if it gets out of sync with Stripe, it's not clear how to get it back in sync. Yeah, there may be some bits of content that you could change and push back, you know, if you're writing new pages or something for the site, but certainly not anything which is in the BBPress or BuddyPress bit. Right. Yeah. So in terms of PHP code, like with overrides and custom PHP code, I just have some set shell scripts that once I get them working, it'll kind of push them out to my sites. The funny thing is I've talked to people who claim that they're using MemberPress and charging and all this kind of thing, and they say that they push things up and down at the development site. Whenever I've asked them, whenever I've tried to, you know, push in for the details, I never get anything. I mean, I haven't figured out how to do it. I don't think it can be done, but some people claim to do it. And actually, this becomes pertinent.
this kind of question is similar to a question which I'm very interested in. I would really like to move our main commercial site from SiteGround to somewhere else. And one of the things that's stopping me is I don't feel up to the task of moving it without getting things out of sync. And when I talked to a couple of times, I talked to consultants that say, "Oh, we can do this; it's no problem." And so when I ask them about these questions of things getting out of sync and how is this going to be done precisely, the first answer I get is, "Well, you know, we'll take care of it, no problem. We know how to do it." But when I try to drill down and ask them specific questions, how are you going to keep this specific problem from happening? Then usually the answer changes to, well, you know, you'll have to handle that. I don't know if anyone here has actually moved an e-commerce site from one hosting provider to another. I'd love to talk to an actual person who's done that with their own, you know, with a site they cared about.
I suppose it depends on the size of the site and the volume of transactions that are taking place.
Right, yes, and we've got, I mean, we're going to have we've got enough going on that there's, you know, we can't just, I mean, there's going to be lost transactions. And I haven't figured out how to recover from that. So I've, anyway.
That's why some big companies spend months, if not years, working out how to do the migration from one version to another, because they try to make sure that all those things don't get lost. And that's not something most people can afford to do.
Yeah.
If you happen to have a site where you're taking one order a day or something, and you back up the site and restore it within the afternoon onto a new hosting company, then you probably, if that order was placed, you can just go and place it manually yourself.
Yeah.
The original version of the site.
I think we probably got too many interactions to do that. And also, what I have experienced on the test site when things get out of sync is, and I don't really understand exactly what's happened here, but what I've experienced is that MemberPress and Stripe get out of sync, and there are other problems other than just losing a few transactions. But I haven't managed to figure out what's going on there, and this isn't something that MemberPress support has been very helpful with. Anyway, let's see. I guess that's my answer to those questions. And, you know, I've developed a lot of tools to just, you know, basically in Python and stuff like that, just to kind of keep track of how many members we got, what's happening, and graph things out. But that's a little beyond the scope of what we're talking about here, I guess.
Did you say graph SQL?
No, just plot out things that are happening, like, you know, what percentage of our members visit the site in a given day and stuff like that. Also to scan through, I've got some scripts that scan through the HTTP logs trying to look for suspicious behavior, but it turns out there's so much suspicious behavior that hasn't been very useful.
Have you tried using something like WordFence to?
Oh yes, we have premium WordFence on both our serious sites, and I have the free WordPress on all the test sites, WordFence on all the test sites. I think we would have been in serious trouble without WordFence.
Other people would agree with you there, I think.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I said that I use WordFence about a quarter of the time, because there are some sites which don't seem to need to be protected in the same way that WordFence wants to protect it.
Yeah, I have WordFence. I also have something called limit login for the specific purpose of just making it handier how many retries people can do. And also, I have plugged in some PHP code of my own into the login process, so I can watch on the test. I wouldn't do this on a real site because it would be too sneaky, but on the test site, I've actually been accumulating, like seeing what kind of passwords the hackers are used. you know, the test site gets, you know, hundreds of hacking attempts a day. And they all seem to use the same dictionary of not very inventive passwords. Yeah, having that code linked in on all the sites, it also helps us on a commercial site to see when people say, I can't log in, you know, you can go back and just see if they actually even tried or not, if they went somewhere else. So I found that having a little bit of my, oh, and the other thing is with MemberPress, I found it about 2.5 years ago when we first installed MemberPress, I guess it's more like 3 years now. I found out that through looking at my code, I found out you could go to the MemberPress login page, and MemberPress wasn't calling the WordPress login failed code, and therefore any security plugin you put in there didn't know that people were trying to hack into the site. And it took, I mean, if I hadn't plugged in some of my own code, if I hadn't tinkered around with this, I would never have known that. And it took me a long time to convince MemberPress that that was actually a thing. They did fix that, but.
Oh, well, thanks, Mike. Neil, would you want to tell us about your local installation now?
Yeah, I can do.
Best thing to do is, Mike, stop sharing if you haven't already done so. Can you share your screen?
Yeah, I can indeed. Let's have a look. So, right, okay. So, it's probably worth saying I'm fairly new to building websites. So over the last couple of years, I've worked as a virtual assistant. So I was doing updates for people, updating, you know, kind of random things for people, and then started building alongside. And now it's pretty much all I do alongside other clients that I work with. So I use local. It was something that was shown to me maybe a year ago and just completely changed how I work every day, because for me, probably 90% of what I build is kind of a starter site. So I specialize in doing stuff for, you know, like, I don't know, therapists or people like that. So they really just want like a 4 or 5 pager, and they want somewhere to book, and they want links out to things like Calendly for booking appointments and stuff like that. So local really changed how I worked, because when I first started, I was building the company that I use is SiteGround at the moment if I'm building for someone else. But actually, quite a lot of the time I'm building to put into somebody else's hosting. So it just means that I can work and pick up my laptop. I can go wherever I want to go. I don't need the internet. I can just sit down and build, and I can just come back in and, you know, upload wherever I want. So this is local. Local, I think you saw earlier, was a quick download. If you switch off your anything that stops it building. But actually, one of the things you can do with your local sites here is, and it's free, is that you can build here locally, like we've already said. But actually, the main one that I do is that you can build from a blueprint. So I've literally just spent a couple of minutes, just as you were finishing up, Mike, building this WordPress Pompey site. But what I did was spun it up from a blueprint, and the blueprint is where I've gone in, started a new site from here. If I didn't have a blueprint, I'd create a new site. It gives me the option of which version of WordPress I want to use, you know, what kind of, you can toggle like older versions, so you can build up from there. But actually, if you've already got a blueprint, you can go in, and here you see I've got a Divi starter site because I build mostly in Divi, and I created it in August. I can just go in, it tells me what PHP version, whatever I've got, installed plugins, everything that's there, and I can just build from that. I'll come back now though. So I did that on the WordPress Pompey site here. What it does is, if I've built a site already, or you spend kind of 20 minutes putting together a site, putting the plugins that you want, the WordPress version that you want, the theme that you want to use to start with, the basic, you can then go in and you can save that as a blueprint. So you see here, it's got save as blueprint. So you can have as many blueprints as you like on here. But what you do is once it starts up, it basically clones completely the site that you have. So I'll pull over the one that I just did, which is here. So this is the WordPress Pompey site. From the dashboard, you can see they need some updating because when I created the blueprint, some of the plugins are now out of date. So it gives you effectively a straight up site. But things like the pages that I always have in place, they're already there. So everything that I'd have on my blueprint just loads up as if it's a complete copy. So when I start, instead of doing what I would do maybe 6 months ago, 9 months ago, I'd go in, I'd load, I'd upload my Divi, my Divi theme. I'd go in and delete all the old themes that I didn't want. I'd add in all the plugins manually. I don't have to do that. I press the button, I build from here, and it gives me my base build. And obviously I can go and change that. And then if I went to the actual site itself, it's a bit slow because obviously it's on my local and we're on a call at the same time. So this is basically a basic site build that I use to start from. So it's ready to go, and this is literally 10 minutes from, you know, where we started. And then I can go in and enable my builder, delete and upload from the cloud anything that I've already saved, because where I use Divi, it has a cloud that I can build in local, and then I can save directly from local into cloud and pull down into whatever site I'm working on. So for me, it's made such a huge difference because actually I use this along with one other tool. If I go back, we were talking, I think Mike, you were saying you've not had any luck with any of the like migration plugins. I use all-in-one WordPress migration, and actually I've had not too many problems with it. It's been pretty good. You just click and export to file. It spins up the file. You download it directly. I save it automatically away with a little bit of code. It'll probably do this. But it literally gives you a complete copy of the site to download. And obviously, like you were saying, maybe it certainly wouldn't help if you were cloning a live site that you needed to keep things like sales and stuff in. I'll stop doing that anyway now. Because it's on there.
Is that a paid version, Neil?
No, that's free.
No, that's a free version.
Yeah, it's free. So, and you get you basically get a file that then when you go into any site that you've got all-in-one WordPress migration on, you can then go in, and as you can see, it's got export to, but actually you can import, and all you have to do is click on import and pull the file in, and it literally replaces the entire site with everything that you've got. So I could clone, this gives me a clone of this site immediately. So there's two ways that I'll use local. One of them is I'll build locally, then I'll use all-in-one WordPress migration to rip the site, and then I'll go into whatever client's hosting that I've got. First thing I do is install all-in-one WordPress migration, and then I import that site, and it gives me everything that I had built 5 minutes ago within 5 minutes up on that site. So
all the core files in as well with it.
Yeah, it brings everything, literally the whole site. It rips the whole thing. It's very good, and it's probably takes about a minute on a live site. It's because obviously I've got so much going on. But yeah, I tend to do this actually for backup. So like Mike was saying, he uses SiteGround, I use SiteGround, but actually what I do is every couple of days I'll go in and I'll rip a backup. I'll export straight into file here. Now the other options here, like Google Drive and stuff like that, those are part of the paid version. But actually, if you're happy to use file, and my links, all of my Google Drives and everything that I use are linked directly here. So I just drop it into file and then a little bit of Python code saves it off every day, so it's gone. So the biggest thing for local is obviously if you were downloading a site, you wanted to try a different version of PHP, or you wanted to try a different WordPress version before you updated. So if I go to an old, I don't know, an old build, look, it'll give me what version it was at the time, and it gives me an option of now going in and changing the PHP version back, rolling something out. The other thing on this, it's free. What you're able to do is you can connect, like you were saying, to WordPress or Flywheel, but actually with using the WordPress all-in-one, it's definitely great if you've got Flywheel. My friend builds with Flywheel and it just pings backwards and forwards and it does its own thing, but actually you don't really need to worry too much. But you can, if you see in the add-ons here, got cloud backup. So I have a cloud backup installed. What this allows you to do, again, it's a free thing. It allows you to link to, say, your Google Drive, and then on your sites, you're able to then go in and you're able to save those as a cloud backup, which means if you see here, this one says backup. This is one that I did earlier today on my laptop in my studio. And then because I'm using a desktop at home, I've just pulled the backup in because I want to carry on doing some work. But obviously what I could do is just do the WordPress migration and open that. So for me, it's perfect because it allows me to go and work anywhere, like in a coffee shop or Thailand or wherever it is I'm going to be. I don't need necessarily, I can have a spotty connection, and as long as I've got, my build information and what I need to do, I can just sit and build without worrying about being connected. And then it allows me also to pull down versions and locally host. Although it does let you, so it does on the free version, this one here as well, it does let you, as long as your computer has access to the internet, it does allow you to host and a client can dial in and see the site if you really want to, but I don't tend to. I then tend to stage that. So I'll put a staging site up and let them see it. So any question? Like show and tell.
Do you use local to help you with staging sites? Because some people do.
I don't. Because I host as well. I tend to just use a different something that I'm not a site I'm not using. I tend to put staging on there, or if I am building for a client and hosting for them, I just put a staging site together. But yeah, that's I haven't yet needed to use it for staging, but my friend does say he just uses staging on his local PC and then lets the client just dial in or log in, I should say, and they can see everything that's going on.
That's a really good explanation of everything, Neil. Thanks for sharing it tonight at Pompey.
Thank you. No problem.
I hope you'll do something else in the future too.
Yeah, I'd love to, yeah. There you go.
Can you, when you've got multiple sites there, Neil, can you run them concurrently?
Yes. Yeah, so if you want, I'll just show you. So what it does...
Did you stop the sharing, did you?
No, there you go. Come back. So yeah, so if let's say we wanted to look at this Divi building site, you can see over here, I've got WordPress admin. The other thing it does as well, which is lovely, it's got a one-click admin. So when you do use a blueprint, you don't have to go in and set your admin and your password and do all that stuff. You can stick this one-click admin on, and when I click WordPress admin, it then spins up the site and logs me in, so it's ready to go. So I think this is, there you go. So I've got 8 updates to do on this one because I haven't been in there for a while. But yeah, so you can have that one running. The other one that I was looking at just a minute ago is still running, and you can see you've got a green dot sitting next to the ones here that are running.
Right.
And then you can do, this is the live link that I was talking about. You can enable live linking on it, which means you can actually have your home, like my PC here, can be running it on a live link, and then I can dial in and work on that same version. But yeah, if I was building, probably not the best idea, but if I wanted to start that one up as well, it would just keep until your computer runs out of space, basically, or runs out of memory, I should say.
And they can run different versions of PHP and different versions of WordPress.
Yep.
Because each one's a local install.
Yeah, you can just go in and choose whatever it is you want to do. If you wanted to copy, so let's say I wanted to copy this building area one that I built, and I wanted to try it in a different version of PHP, or let's say for your plugins that you're building, you can build your plugin, you can set up a test site, you can set it up with different versions of PHP, different version of WordPress, and have 5 or 6 all down with the same info. And obviously, if you've used the blueprint, what you're able to do is start from the oldest version and then update in increments, so you can test your plugin on different versions of everything. So it's just the only limit on here is how much memory and how much space you've got on your PC or on the computer you're using. So.
And do you always use this interface, or do you actually go to site folder or open site shell to administer different things?
I'm more likely just going to work on here. Honestly, I'm learning much more, so I'm doing a lot more front-end development. So I do a bit more CSS and stuff like that. But actually, I'm learning at the moment to do a bit more of the back end. And I'm sure so I don't end up breaking live sites, I'll be doing all of that in here. But as I say, I think the biggest thing is when we all know that you get a client and they just want the same site as somebody else that you've done some work for, you can effectively rip one site down, add it onto local, change some of the files back, and then you can shortcut the whole project. Basically, that first couple of hours that I used to spend just pulling something together is now 5 minutes, which is really nice. But yeah, so but it's all right. I shall stop sharing. There you go.
So, anything else from anybody else? I'm conscious.
I have one quick question, Neil or Herb. I have occasionally run into problems where I'm pushing a site up to a different place, and a particular hosting has different access control conventions. Do you guys ever run into that? Like, I know Bluehost and SiteGround use the same kind of thing, and I think Liquid Web does too. So, but like Lightsail and some others have, different ownership for some of the files. Have you guys ever run into that?
It's I've built, or I guess I've worked with a few different hosts. I don't tend to have a problem, mainly because, as I say, I don't tend to get involved too much in the back end other than, just pulling stuff in.
Oh, okay.
But really with that combination of building locally, downloading using that WordPress all-in-one, and then uploading into WordPress all-in-one once I'm in, it doesn't really cause me a problem. But I'm less back end, so
okay.
I haven't yet had an issue with any of the big ones that people sign up to.
Have you done anything on AWS? Like,
not yet.
AWS. Okay.
Not yet. Other than
that's where I ran into different conventions.
Yeah.
But
I've signed up to do their courses, but I haven't actually done them yet.
Oh, cool. That's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see.
I wanna hire you when you get to be an expert on AWS.
All right, I better crack on then.
We've actually tried to hire those people. When you go on AWS and you look for consultants, we've tried to contact some of them. None of them have ever answered us.
No, they're so busy. I think.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous. I think I've signed up just at the point where they're going to change I've signed up and started doing some of the work, but I think they're going to change it like in the next month or so. So one of my friends mentioned to me the other day, I might have just wasted like the last few months of study. I'm sure I haven't, but he's a bit of an end of the world person. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Neil, for that. Now,
Pleasure.
I'm conscious that we've slightly overrun, as we always used to do, but we're not going to overrun past 9 o'clock. I think I might share my screen again. And what can you see? Recommended pros and cons?
Yep.
Good. Right, now I may have gone on to talk about WP-env and Docker and so on, but I never actually found out really what it was all about. WP-env is a tool which WordPress uses for building things like Gutenberg, and they also use it for building, I suppose people also use it for building WooCommerce and Jetpack, so on. But I don't understand it, and I installed it to try to understand it, but I didn't. So I'm not going to actually talk about it, I'm afraid. What I will talk about is that if you want to read some blog posts by some people who know all about developing stuff, then these are, what's that, 10 there, all written by Delicious Brains, which tells you how they use their different systems, and they basically used most of the things that we would have tried to talk about today, apart from local. But Delicious Brains are now being incorporated into WPEngine, and therefore they may have to start using local, because local is by WPEngine, and who was the other one? Flywheel. So if you want to read some blog posts all about local development environments, I'd start there. So we're coming to the end bit now, where I say thank you very much to all our community sponsors. I think that's the list for 2022. Emma can tell me if I'm not right. Jetpack, WooCommerce, Bluehost, Weglot, Nexus, and WordPress.com. And you can go and visit WordCamp, Central WordCamp, global community sponsors, to find out more about all that stuff. Thank you very much to the people who joined our meetup this month. There are another 7 added on, so we've now got 423 members. And as you can see, it's close to 500,000 people who are members of Meetup, who are members of WordPress meetups. And the number of groups has gone back up a bit. It went down from July, and it's now gone back up to 766. But there might be some dropping off. Bristol may eventually disappear as a meetup group just because they haven't been meeting for the last 2 years. This month we've now got 423 people, and 25 said they were going to come to the meeting. We've had about 15, the most number, which is quite good. What we want to know is what's going on in WordPress. Well, on Monday last week, I went to the WordPress Cambridge meetup, which is online, and we talked about WooCommerce for beginners, and I had a quick preview of WordPress 6.1, which is being developed right now. WordPress 6.1 release candidate 1 was released last Wednesday, and release candidate 2 was available yesterday. No, that's not right, last Tuesday then. Yesterday was a meetup of WordPress Edinburgh, which has switched to Tuesdays. It was Wednesdays. And next Thursday is WordPress Leeds meetup, which is climate-friendly WordPress, which is the same day as WordPress 6.1 release candidate 3 gets issued, which is the last sort of main one before the dry run, which has a 24-hour code freeze. And then finally on the 1st of November, WordPress 6.1 will become live. Won't it, Abba?
It will indeed.
It will indeed. And how has the About Us page bit, or whatever it is, the thing been written yet?
Yes, I think it's been sent for translation, and we finished all the main dev notes.
Yeah.
A week ago, I think.
Oh.
But there's still lots of end user documentation that's needed, and lots of Learn WordPress materials that we're starting to work on now. So
Hello.
anybody wants to come and help, has experience in this.
And where do they need to go to
let
do
me know.
that?
So they can either let me know on the Make WordPress Slack. I'm at ABBA Nonstop News UK on there, or they can send me a message on Twitter, or they can join the channels. So whichever route is easier for somebody, we can help signpost. But we're working now on the end user stuff for dev notes, and it's really important to have those, and it helps meetups as well. So if that's something that you have experience of, writing developer notes, documentation, technical documentation, or you could do an online course. Herb, I think you should do an online course for local development environments for Learn WordPress, because I couldn't find one. So I think that would be really good.
Well, I think the Delicious Brains people would probably be the best people for that. I did invite Ross Wintle to come, but unfortunately it doesn't fit in with his family business on a Wednesday evening.
Well, I still think, Herb, it'd be nice for you to have a look at those, because I think you're
Okay.
pretty good
So
presenter.
who doesn't know what Learn WordPress is?
Has everyone heard of learnwordpress.org? Yeah, it's a free resource.
I haven't.
I
Not
haven't.
me.
Okay. So it's learn.wordpress.org. It's totally free. It's made by the community for the community, and it has online tutorials. It has meetups that you can join, that some are recorded, some are not, and covering some of the things in more detail that we cover in a meetup. The tutorials can be in different parts, so that you could just do one section that you need to learn about, or you could eventually, as the content grows, do a whole course. But they're always looking for people to help, because we are what make WordPress special, actually people's contributions. And I think, Neil in particular, I think you'd enjoy it. I think a lot of people on here would enjoy it, and it's free to use, which is even better.
Oh, definitely check it out. Thank you.
There you go.
WordPress Accessibility Day is the 2nd and 3rd of November, and it's 24 hours of talks all about accessibility with speakers from across the globe. So really would commend that to you. Many of the talks are recorded. You can also listen to the talks from a previous year.
I went to that website today. Unfortunately, it didn't work, but now it does. So there you go. You can have a look at WordPress accessibility today. And a person who talked to us last month, Graham Armfield, Coolfields Consulting, should be on the list of speakers.
But it's a great way to learn how to make your sites more accessible, to understand the problems that users face, and just generally to make open source better.
There you go. Now, if you wait and don't want to install WordPress 6.1 immediately on the 1st of November and you want to find out about it from somebody, then WordPress Cambridge intend to talk about it in their meeting on the 14th of November, covering both WordPress 6.1 and, of course, the new theme for 2023, which will be the default theme for 2023. This is a full site editing or block-based theme, and it is sort of built from 2022, but has 10 different styles. So you can just pick the style you want for the theme, and it will give you the look and feel in different colors and shapes and sizes.
And if I remember correctly, it's also an accessible theme, so which is a really good start to have that.
Of which there are about 4 or 5 themes, of which are full site editing themes, which are marked as being accessible.
Cool.
Right.
There's also going to be a lot of, there's a field guide for anybody who wants to know what's in 6.1, and that's already out, and we're just adding developer notes to it. So, if you're looking for something in particular and want to know how that is going to pan out, do have a look at those. And we've made a real attempt with the dev notes to make them even more friendly, but also to make it clearer about, so people can follow them and they can tie more into the materials on Learn WordPress as well. And when I talk about, you know, we and everything else, it is the community. The community is producing all these materials, and there's no one single person.
Oh, and there's a lot of work been going on in WordPress.org. There's a lot of things have started looking different from how they used to as well. Who's doing that, Abba?
What do you mean? Do you mean things like
Well,
the WordPress?
like when you just visit WordPress.org and you look at the main page, it's
Yeah,
got
so
a new...
there's been a whole new redesign that's been it has a consultation in the design team, and it went out to all teams. I think it was in the Meetup organizers bulletins and things like that. And so they've had contributions and ideas from all sorts of areas, and I think, yeah, it's nice. There are lots of things people have had ideas for. They put proposals forward, and then those ideas get developed.
Is that redesign of the WordPress.org still sort of ongoing, or is that?
I think they've rolled out some bits, and I can send you the link, Michael. I'll look while I'm talking to you now, of which sets out what they're going to do next and what the plans are.
Oh, okay.
So if you've got, I know there was a consultation about what things people would like to change on it. I'm not sure if that's still open, but I'll see if I can find out for you.
That's okay. I was just kind of curious. It kind of had the impression it was sort of in process. So I was just curious about that.
It's a good question.
Right, moving on. Right, so full site editing themes is a big thing this year, and there was a target of reaching 500 by the end of the year. We've now got to 162, so it's a bit of a long way off the target, but there's still an awful lot of themes being created, and you can go and have a look at those themes by going to WordPress.org themes tags full site editing, or you can have a look at my own website, which is the first link there, and you can see this is where these figures come from, theme statistics. And if you want to work with a theme, you could actually try generating a theme at my link at the bottom there. Plugin called Foster Child. More about full site editing in the future, I would hope, once we've learned about it. But next month at our meetup, we hope to cover headless CMS and blazingly fast front ends, whatever they are. Now, Neil showed local, there was an opportunity to create a headless WordPress using local, and maybe I will actually go back to try local just to go and do that one, because until I can find someone who can talk to us about it, I'm going to have to try and work it out for myself. So if you know anybody who can talk about it, that's great. And then in December, maybe we can have another go at having a look at different caching plugins. A lot of us use SiteGround, and therefore we probably use SiteGround Optimizer, and we might want to know how well that does compared to some of the other caching plugins, the popular ones, WP Super Cache, W3 Total Cache, and you tell me what else is there. And that'll be the year wrapped up, which is great. And what will we do next year? I don't know. Maybe we'll have some physical meetups, maybe one every 3 months, or maybe we'll have hybrid meetups. But I think we'll definitely continue with online meetups because it is so easy to do. Finally, WordPress 6 has been downloaded 118 million times. The latest version of Gutenberg is 14.3.1. There are 60,295 plugins on WordPress.org, 200 of them created in the last month. I looked at the list of those 200 plugins. An awful lot of them are to do with WooCommerce, and some I have no idea what they're about. Maybe there's too many plugins, or maybe there's just not enough. There are 10,000 themes, and the number of themes being developed is of the classic themes, the ones written in PHP as opposed to the FSE themes, which are mostly HTML, is about still 3 to 4 times as many themes being added per month as there are FSE themes. So an awful lot of choice there, and 7.5 billion plugin downloads have happened since figures started being counted. So was it WordPress SEO or Yoast SEO is now 475 million downloads. 7 years ago, it was 45 million downloads. And that's it. Thank you very much to our sponsors, redIT and 34SP. Scott is here. He hasn't said anything. I don't know where he's listening on the bus or something. And thank you, Scott, for being our sponsor. And thank you, 34SP. And when we do get to meet physically one day, maybe we can ask 34SP for some more money for our pizzas. And
I've just shared the links for the dev notes for 6.1. Anyone needs them, and the design background. I wasn't part of it, so I don't know more about it, but I do know that that's the information you'll want.
Right, and if you want to save that, all you need to do is click on Save Chat, and that will save all the links from the different people who have contributed today. Thank you very much for everybody. It is now 10 to 9. And I suppose I'm going to press the stop recording button if only I could find it.
A big thanks to her for organising all this and for doing that presentation.